Story 1. I work in a large corporate building. The same older woman came by everyone's desk toward the end of the day to collect the trash. She was the sweetest person. Every time she walked to my desk, she gave me a big smile, asked how my day was, and chatted for a minute while she collected my trash. Usually I would dump it into her cart. I had some rough days, but she had a way of cheering me up and sending me home in a better mood. I know I am not the only one. A few weeks ago, our workplace implemented a new policy to reduce trash use. We are no longer allowed to have a trash bin at our desk and must walk across the room to use the communal trash bins. It was not a huge deal, but the real reason was to reduce costs, that is, to reduce the cleaning staff. Sadly, I have not seen Sharon since. Story 2. The boss pitched a sales incentive trip to Cancun if the team hit the goal. My team exceeded the goal and then they canceled the trip. 2 people quit. I accepted a position with their main competitor, and less than a year later they filed for bankruptcy. Karma's a bitch. Story 3. I work for an electrical contracting company with 35 employees, 27 of whom are field technicians. We earn paid time off hours based on the number of hours worked in a given week. Full-time employees earn the equivalent of about 6 extra paid days off per year, which are typically used for errands, sick days, childcare, and similar needs. One field employee is known by other field technicians to be an alcoholic. Word reached office personnel that this individual was using paid time off because he had drunk too much the night before and could not make it to work on time. The owner denied his paid time off request, and the employee drove to the office to confront the owner. The next day, a company-wide email stated that paid time off would be suspended indefinitely because it was being abused. I am not sure whether this action is legal. Instead of addressing the individual situation, management used it as a way to avoid paying out about 180 earned days off across the company. This happened about a week ago, and morale dropped instantly. Most field technicians began arriving late, spending time on their phones, and leaving early. A couple of employees have already quit, and it sounds like many others may follow. I am going to wait it out a couple of months because I am owed a Yeti cooler and vacation time on my anniversary. Story 4. Small business. About 20 employees, plus or minus. The boss gave a big speech about austerity and no raises this year. A week and a half later, he arrived in a brand new Silverado with all the bells and whistles, expense to the business. He would hate to have to pay taxes on those profits. One of the less subtle staff members defecated in front of his office door. Story 5. A poster read, "Complaining is like vomiting. You feel better, but everyone around you feels sick." The morale was already low, and the poster was a shitty way to attack upset employees instead of doing anything positive. Story 6. Telling employees that you are going to fire them if they do not make more sales. Then, when someone quits, saying, "No, that was just motivation. We were never going to fire you." Story 7. I told the hiring manager that I was disappointed in one of his hires because he knew literally nothing about our job, and I asked him, "Doesn't that cheapen my knowledge and expertise?" His response was, "Well, let's be honest, your job doesn't really need all that, does it?" For other peers with varying expertise were at the meeting, and it became very quiet. Story 8. I once had a retail manager who sent out a memo saying we had worked so hard and had done such a great job that she would receive a bonus. That went over like a lead balloon. Story 9. I am a former teacher. The administrators at my school were usually pretty chill, but they had a habit of randomly creating minor rules that they enforced for us, such as male teachers having to wear ties even on Jeans Day and other similar rules. Overall, it was not bad, except for the time an administrator made a crucial mistake. They banned staff from drinking coffee in front of students. If you have never worked in a school, you might think this is not a big deal. When you spend nearly 100% of your day in front of students, it definitely is a big deal. We tried to find any loophole we could. Energy drinks were banned the next week. Tea was banned 2 days later. It was chaos. Eventually we realized they could not fire an entire school's worth of teachers and aides, so we did the one thing that private schools fear most. We formed a union. In reality, it was a pseudo-union focused on civil disobedience over the coffee ban, but it still ruffled feathers. The administrators caved to our demands, allowed us to drink coffee again, and even bought each of us a reusable coffee mug as a gesture of goodwill. That is the story of how a handful of school administrators almost accidentally created a teachers' union over a complete non-issue. Story 10. I worked at a club in Miami. The owner was out of his mind after years of drug abuse. When the housing market crashed, people spent far less going out, but he insisted we were all stealing. We had weekly meetings with threats. Finally, he installed an automatic pouring system that cost $50,000. It looked like a soda gun dispenser and was boring. The fun vibe and flair were gone, and sales dropped further. He removed the system 2 weeks later. Story 11. I used to work at an English immersion middle school in Korea. The administration was all Korean, including my boss, the vice principal. Rumors began to circulate that the school was under investigation for certain administrators taking bribes to admit students. The vice principal became visibly anxious for a few weeks. Then, one Sunday night, we received a text from one of the Korean teachers stating that the vice principal had passed away. It turned out he had hanged himself in the school lobby that afternoon. The teaching staff still had to report to work the next morning even though classes were canceled for several days. I remember walking into the school and seeing a custodian mopping the spot where the vice principal had been. Morale declined sharply for a while. Story 12. She told a bunch of people they would be promoted to get us to do extra work. No one was promoted. I basically did her job for a month. My 3 coworkers and I quit, and she was fired a few months later. Story 13. I had a boss everyone loved. Then she was transferred to another store. The new manager who replaced her decided the schedule we had become used to needed to be shaken up. He posted the schedule for the next week, which was completely different from the previous managers. He received many complaints from people who said they could not work certain days or times, and he seemed receptive because he took the schedule down. Then he reposted the exact same schedule and ignored everyone. Under the old manager, some people called in sick from time to time, but this new manager has nearly half his crew calling out every single day because of his tactics. Here is the first thing to learn about being a good manager. You do not need to shake things up for people to be better workers. You do not need to put your mark on something that is already working fine. Story 14. I have 2 examples. Company 1. They canceled the Christmas party and Christmas bonuses for the entire company, saying they did not have the money. I later learned that the chief executive officer and the chief technology officer used company funds to take a week-long ski vacation in Whistler instead of doing something for the employees. I shared that evidence with others in the office. Company 2. My current company, over the last couple of years, switched from offering guaranteed permanent employment to long-term employees to using permanent contract labor for a large portion of the workforce. Rumors of unionization have started among the contract workers. Story 15. Company held a super positive, pep rally-style company-wide meeting about how they were going to combine our sick days with our vacation days and call them paid time off. This was presented as a great change, since we could now use our paid time off days fully as vacation if we wanted. Once the system was implemented, everyone realized that instead of getting 10 vacation days and 10 sick days per year, we now all had 15 paid time off days. Everyone was angry. I just want to say that anyone bragging in the replies about how this would not affect them because they do not use their sick days has misplaced priorities. Story 16. In a company of 6 people, the owner said at a meeting with everyone that his 2 salespeople are irreplaceable and that the rest of us are just paper pushers. Story 17. He had a big fight with his wife in front of everybody. I do not think you should run a restaurant with your family members unless you are really solid with each other. Story 18. At an airplane factory, the manager began rationing gloves, hairnets, masks, and trash bags while we were moved to a 12-hour, 6-day workweek, as if that would compensate for rising labor costs. Story 19. They got rid of the night cleaning crew the week after I started, so we had to learn how to clean the whole department on our own before closing. I work in the meat department, which meant taking apart and cleaning 2 meat grinders and a bandsaw covered in meat residue. Almost the entire department quit because of this, but I stayed and learned the routine. After about 3 months, they rehired the cleaning crew, and now closing is a breeze. I know most meat departments do not have a cleaning crew. Story 20. I worked at a family-owned market that was well-known and loved by locals. The owners were a lovely couple who took care of their employees and bent over backwards for their customers. They were very active in the community and highly respected. They had a few core employees and hired temporary staff during the summer and holidays. The temps were mostly high school students and college students home on break. They rehired the same seasonal workers whenever possible, and the young employees tried to stay as long as they could. Pay was well above market for those positions. Employees could shop there with a 75% discount. After 6 months, they received 2 weeks of paid vacation, and the owners closed the store a few days a year to host a party for employees. It was the best job any high school student in the area could get. I lived next to the store and my parents were friends with the owners, so I was given a job there. All my friends were jealous. After a few years, the couple decided to retire to spend time with their daughter and her children in another state. They held a large retirement party, introduced their son, and announced he would take over, praising his business education and background. As soon as they left, the son decided to remake the store in his image. He fired nearly all the staff, most of whom had worked there for 10 to 15 years or more. He replaced them with homeschooled students and people with substance use problems. He eliminated discounts and vacation benefits and hired old high school friends to manage the store so he could take the profits to party and use cocaine. The store, which had once kept the same staff for years, now had to retrain a new crew every few months. No one wanted to stay. Managers reported perfectly good product as damaged and took it home. Shelves sat empty and customers stopped shopping there. The store became a shadow of its former self. After enough friends complained about their son, the original owners returned briefly to try to make things right, but it was too late. Their original staff had moved on and vendors had stopped doing business with the store. They decided to close the store, sell the property, and move away permanently. Last I heard, the son ran into trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, and his wife divorced him after discovering he had sex with a stripper. Story 21. Management changed the metrics that determined employees' bonuses and added measures important to the business, but completely beyond the control of the people whose bonuses were affected. For example, we had a right party contact rate, how often you reached the person you were calling compared to the number of calls made. The phone number list came from another team, and callers were simply given a list and required to call every number with no leeway. People were calling blindly from a list they did not control and were penalized when the list was poor. Oddly, the team responsible for producing the phone number lists did not have their bonuses tied to the right party contact rate. Story 22. She was fired 3 days before her maternity leave was due to start, while she was in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Story 23. They started firing people by lining 2 up at a time and choosing which one to keep. It did not matter if you had been there for 20 years or 2. They also hired managers from outside instead of promoting from within, so the new managers had no knowledge of company ethics, procedures, or employee status. This has turned the workplace into a clique-like environment where everyone looks out for themselves. It is very toxic. Story 24. We had an employee who worked herself to exhaustion for the job. She loved the venue, the clients, and the work, so she would continue working after clocking off, take work home, and come in on weekends. She consistently went above and beyond and received excellent feedback from clients and suppliers. Our contract states we are entitled to a $5,000 raise after 3 years of employment. At our annual review, having been there 3.5 years, she requested the raise and was told there was no room in the budget. She could have taken them to the Fair Work Commission, but instead she began looking for other jobs. She left and secured a great position at a great company where she is thriving. The person they hired to replace her had a quarter of the experience, no passion for the job, and an annual salary $10,000 higher. Most of us have since left, and the place is falling apart. Story 25. Someone casually said the best employee was X, and everyone, including X, knew they did the least work. X was the friendliest to the boss and always came by to say hello and ask if the boss needed anything. Story 26. We were once in the middle of a very stressful period of work and everyone was feeling it. One afternoon, an offhand comment turned into a conversation that involved the whole team and led to a few laughs. My manager returned from a meeting and asked whether we had finished tomorrow's work and what it was all about. The entire team instantly deflated. It was unnecessary. Every employee needs time to blow off a little steam. Story 27. The head of department realized that we were not going to meet our targets for the financial year. He completely banned annual leave for 3 months, forced anyone who did not submit their timesheet on time to attend a disciplinary meeting despite system problems that prevented some timesheets from being completed, and generally terrified lower management. This created a massive blame culture and led to several people being signed off with mental health issues. In the end, the employee survey that went to his bosses was extremely negative, and he is now elsewhere making other people's lives miserable. The best part was when his replacement arrived and fired his right-hand man, who was also difficult. Story 28. In a very short span of time, they changed everyone's 401k retirement plan for the worse, and then implemented an office-wide cleanliness policy. No eating at your desk. Only 3 personal items, all labeled, may remain. Nothing else except your keyboard, mouse, and monitors may be on your desk at the end of the day. Talk about being very angry. You could feel the gloom when you walked in. Everyone's willingness to care vanished at once. Story 29. Large factory, not unionized. Each department clocks in at a different place, usually the department's break room. My department clocked in across the facility from the main entrance, so it took about 15 minutes to walk from the front door to where we clocked in and out, plus another 5 minutes to walk from that entrance to the parking lot. There was a side exit we used that cut the walk from 20 minutes to 3 minutes, since our department was next to the parking lot. Management decided that all employees must enter and exit through the same door, which meant we had to walk to the main entrance and then back around to our cars. There was so much rebellion in our department that employees barred the door with 2x4s. The joke was on management. Even non-unionized employees can be difficult to manage. We contacted the fire marshal, who, upon seeing a fire exit barricaded, fined the company $8,000. We were still not allowed to use the side exit, but management stopped trying to prevent us. Story 30. To cut costs, management introduced a policy granting internet access to only certain departments. The policy created a class system, bred resentment, and prompted an exodus from teams without internet access. Story 31. 4 years I worked in a high-stress, high-turnover, low-paying job as a caregiver for adults with developmental disabilities. These issues are typical in this field, and my company, like many, exploited salaried employees by expecting them to work 50 to 60 hours regularly and often more. I went months at a time working 70 to 90-hour weeks. I stayed through a lot of bullshit because I loved the folks I served. Last year, corporate required all managers to attend a mandatory training about caregiver fatigue. It made it worse for me to have language to describe the fatigue and burnout I had been experiencing for years. During the meeting, corporate acknowledged that they did not pay us enough and that many employees were literally homeless, food insecure, or on the verge of it. But they said increased pay was not on the table right now, so let's talk about other things we can do. They crowdsourced ideas from this exhausted group of salaried workers, who suggested starting a company food pantry, organizing a clothing drive, and compiling lists of local shelters. That meeting was so infuriating that I decided that day it was time to finally get out. I worked my last day for that employer this summer. I am still looking for a full-time job, and I am trying to hold out for a company that values my work enough to pay me fairly. In an ideal world, this new employer would not add insult to injury by mandating training on how to recognize telltale signs of being about to snap. Hopefully, once I have had some time to recover, I will be able to come up with lasting ways to change things in the caregiving industry. These systemic problems will only compound as the baby boomers continue to age. Story 32. Removed cost of living adjustments for all employees and implemented a model of raises only when an employee is promoted or takes on more responsibility. However, promotions are very rare and raises are never approved. As a result, everyone is losing money to inflation, and management tried to present this as a big win for employees. We are not stupid. Story 33. My boss is looking to retire in the next 3 to 4 years. He told everyone that he wanted us to come up with our visions for the company and its future over the next 5, 10, and 20 years. We are a small office of about 6 people, but we have been growing. Everyone mentioned growth projections and succession planning for after he retires. His son is the heir apparent and has a precocious 8-year-old. So in my 20-year version, I even included the grandson joining the business and grooming it to become a legacy company. My boss spoke last. We were expecting him to acknowledge some of our thoughts, or at least to express appreciation that the company he founded would live on well past his retirement and be in good hands. Instead, it was brutal and short. I do everything around here anyway, so I should just sell the company to fund my retirement, and you will all find other companies to work for in a few years. The mood died and the meeting ended. Story 34. Almost 20 years ago, I was the sole information technology person for a small, privately owned research company. Our specialty was nanoscale doodads for government agencies, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the aerospace industry. We had about 80 employees at the time. We were given performance goals for the company as a whole that, if met, would earn everyone a nice bonus. The goals were met. The week the bonus was to be paid, we had a company-wide meeting where the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer said the bonuses could not be paid right away but would be paid eventually. That dented company morale but was not devastating. Layoffs began a couple of weeks later and continued in small batches every few weeks. Rather than doing what needed to be done up front, they kept laying off a handful of people here and there. It destroyed morale as everyone wondered who would go this week and who would go next week. After a few rounds, everyone saw the writing on the wall and morale collapsed. By the time I found another job a few months later, we were down to about 30 people. We never received those bonuses. It worked out for me. I went from $32,000 to $45,000 at the new job. I also felt vindicated when my boss later offered to match that salary after he had turned down a raise of $5,000 that I had requested a couple of months earlier. Story 35. It was a 1-2 punch. The company-wide meeting announced promotions of several high-level managers and executives, mostly title and responsibility changes. Lots of smiles and handshakes, not unlike a college graduation ceremony. After the promotion announcements, they declared that because of the stagnant economy and poor sales, the entire company would have a pay freeze. No raises for anyone. They concluded by discontinuing casual Fridays, so no more jeans on Fridays. It almost felt designed to make people want to quit. It worked. Many of us, including me, moved on to greener pastures within the year. To answer some questions without sharing personal information, this was a mid-sized manufacturing firm in the United States around 2010. I moved on to what became the most lucrative job I have ever held, so I do not hold resentment. I just remember that day utterly destroyed employee morale. If it was ownership or management's plan to get people to quit, it was short-sighted. Only mobile, capable talent left, while those unable to find other jobs and the lifers, people who would likely stay under almost any circumstances, remained. I can understand the need to promote to fill vacancies and the need for a pay freeze, which is better than layoffs, right? But announcing promotions, then a pay freeze, and then ending casual Fridays felt vindictive and malicious. They could have softened the blow by making casual Friday every day. People would have left the meeting at least neutral, if not slightly hopeful. Story 36. They banned smartphones in the break room to force us to talk to one another and build camaraderie. It ended up that we did not like each other that much. Story 37. I worked at a dog daycare center as the assistant manager for a few months. We had just started a training class in which owners told us which commands they wanted their dogs to learn, and we would pull the dogs aside for 1 hour to teach that command with a certified trainer. The service usually cost an extra $45 on top of the daycare visit. Our trainer quit unexpectedly, and the owner asked me and the other manager to step in as trainers. We informed him that we did not have the proper certifications and that our program promised customers a certified trainer. He then told us to bring the dogs in for an hour, have them hang out in the office with us, and he would tell the owners what their dogs had worked on that day. Needless to say, we refused. He blamed us, calling us disloyal and good-for-nothing millennials. He received 6 two-week notices within 1 week after I shared this conversation with the staff. The place had only 10 employees in total. Story 38. Cancelled overtime. I used to work as a helicopter mechanic for a company primarily in the oil patch. We would do a 28 days on and 14 days off rotation in the middle of nowhere, getting up before dawn to prepare the helicopter so it would be ready to fly as soon as the sun came up, fly as needed until sundown, and then secure the aircraft. Typically, the day was easy in between maybe 3 or 4 hours of flying, so you would refuel a couple of times and take care of incidental tasks, like making sure you had enough fuel or going back to camp to grab hot lunches for yourself and the pilot. Overtime was paid as straight time, and the additional half pay was banked as paid vacation. It was not unusual to work double a standard week for the duration, and it was the only thing that made the travel and long shift rotation worthwhile. After I had been with the company a few months, they announced they were no longer paying overtime except for rare special instances, such as staying up all night to do a 100-hour inspection. We were expected to work a split shift, early morning and late evening, and spend the days sitting in camp doing nothing. A lot of people were angry, but I did not stick around for the fallout. I gave my 2-week notice, which coincided with my 2 weeks of earned vacation, and said goodbye. Story 39. I worked in the kitchen of a care home with about 20 staff members. The boss declared we were too happy and created a new set of rules. There was to be absolutely no talking, laughing, or joking. The kitchen was to be silent because, the boss said, we were distracting ourselves from work. Anyone working less than 9 or 10-hour shifts was forbidden bathroom breaks. Going to the bathroom on a shift shorter than 9 or 10 hours was a fireable offense. Permitted bathroom breaks could not be on the clock. You had to use your lunch break to go to the bathroom. Lunch breaks were 15 minutes long. Any communication with management was seen as inappropriate. Staff and management were to be kept separate at all times. This rule followed an incident in which a manager had sex with a staff member. You were not paid overtime but were expected to work. If you were supposed to clock out by 8 p.m., but were still needed, you had to clock out and then return to work. Complaints to Human Resources or the Labor Board were fireable offenses. People complained and the place was investigated. The ex-boss was sued and lost. Morale dropped. They had a hard time keeping employees, and from what I heard, most of the new employees are high school students. The ex-boss announced a sudden retirement effective at the end of the year, and the kitchen will be staffed by new people. I left early. Do not miss the place. Edit. This got much bigger than I expected. Thank you to everyone who reached out, offered advice for similar situations, and sent well wishes. Many middle fingers to my ex-boss. You are all wonderful. Story 40. My significant other experienced this. She worked in a call center and was Employee of the Month with some of the highest performance metrics. She noticed she started getting back-to-back calls while everyone else had 15 or more minutes of availability. She contacted her manager and her manager's manager and was repeatedly reassured that the issue was being investigated. The stress and overwork continued for 3 months. Eventually, she messaged the regional manager and the problem was fixed the next day. My working theory is that one of her managers placed her into a priority queue to make their own statistics look better. However, she received an email saying she would not receive her bonus because she was using after-call work too much. After-call work is a temporary status agents can place themselves in to postpone being put back into the call queue so they can finish work from the previous call. She had no choice because she received only a few seconds between calls. She saved documentation of everything, exposed her managers, quit, and accepted another job all on the same day. Story 41. A new store manager took over a profitable location with happy employees and completely rewrote many policies. Where employees were once encouraged to help in any department when knowledgeable and available, staff began getting written up for working outside their assigned area. People were disciplined for taking overtime to finish assigned task lists or for leaving on time without completing those lists. One manager encouraged employees to take overtime and said they would approve it, but later those employees were reprimanded because the overtime was never approved in our systems. Departments that once collaborated were barred from helping each other unless explicitly instructed by management. A deliveries department did not fully pick customer orders, blamed other departments for missing items, and often left large messes without cleaning up, which resulted in others being penalized. After about a year, morale was completely drained. Only the newest hires seemed to care, because they do not remember how it was before. Story 42. There will be no raises or bonuses this year due to company performance. I will make it up to you by taking the whole company to the lake for a trip on my new 30-foot boat. Story 43. At a city charter school, many community members in aide positions kept the school together. About 20 teachers and staff were purged on a Black Friday about a month before the school year started. They were not given letters to return the next year, and the place went ballistic. They replaced almost half the staff while my principal did not leave his office to assess classroom situations. Instead, he fired teachers. I left after I received an offer, and he told me I should be more loyal to those who gave you an opportunity. My 4 years of college and my teaching license gave me that opportunity. Story 44. I worked at a restaurant with a lousy tipped minimum of $2.63 an hour. We were penalized for being even 5 minutes late, so many of us arrived 20 to 30 minutes early to avoid the penalty. This was Boston, and I have been stuck on the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority subway for 10 to 20 minutes on numerous occasions. We would get right to work because there was plenty to do when opening a large restaurant. We clocked in and started working. No one clocked in without working. I liked getting there early because the kitchen would reach 113 degrees. Most of the morning prep occurred in the kitchen and was fairly rigorous. We did not use air conditioning and had to wear long-sleeve shirts and pants, so I could do all the prep in a tank top and shorts, change into my uniform, and not start my shift a sweaty mess. The manager gave us a long lecture about how it added up, even if it was only $2.63 an hour. She made a new rule that we could not clock in more than 10 minutes before our shift began, even if we were working. That is a 15-minute window of appropriate clock-in time in Boston, with a notoriously unreliable public transportation system, unpredictable weather, and congested roads. Fuck Grafton Street, and fuck you, Ashley. Story 45. I worked at a plumbing shop. New owners, a married couple who had worked there for years, bought out the original owner. As we were heading into Christmas, they called each employee in one at a time to say they would not be receiving a holiday bonus because they had messed something up earlier in the year. My reason was that I had broken a mirror in a customer's bathroom and it cost $200 to replace. I had brought in over $500,000 worth of business that year. The next week, they drove up in a new sports car. When someone asked what it was, another plumber said it was a 2007 Christmas bonus. They have had huge employee turnover since then. No one who worked there when I did from 1994 to 2008 is still there. Story 46. The chief executive officer announced during a company-wide meeting that all employees would receive raises and explained the salary structure by job role, even showing it on a PowerPoint presentation, but did not follow through with any of it. Story 47. Regarding how employees will travel between Site A and Site B, some said that if something happens to their children, they will need a way back, and sharing one vehicle among 8 people makes that difficult. Others said parents will not care about work when notified of a problem with a child, so investing in group transport is unnecessary. We then bought a company van that employees do not like. Story 48. At a company-wide meeting of 45 people, he called the employees an expense. It did not go over well. 2 people stood up and threatened to quit on the spot if the boss did not reevaluate his statement and explain what was wrong with it. This might be a translation error on my part. The meeting was in Swedish. He made it clear by tone of voice and overall demeanor that he thought of the employees only as an expense and not as a resource. Yes, they cost money, but they are also the reason the company earns money. If he could, he said he would do it all himself to save the expense of having employees. We are talking about engineers with years, in some cases decades, of experience, and he thought he could replace them if he had the time. That is what the complaints were about. Story 49. They fired the 3 most likable and productive people in the department to bring in their own people under the guise of downsizing and restructuring. The entire department quit within a month. Story 50. Not me, but someone in my immediate family works for Build-A-Bear Workshop as a chief workshop manager. The Pay Your Age event was horrendous for their team morale and made several of them want to quit. Beyond the main Pay Your Age event, the next day the company sent out coupons for $15 off to everyone, not just the people who showed up and did not get a bear, as a half-hearted way of saying sorry we could not meet demand. It was a deceptive marketing ploy, and they knew full well what it would cause. So while they were out of stock and utterly exhausted, the entire following week they experienced massive traffic and angry customers demanding to use the same printed coupon 4 times in a transaction. It was supposed to be one per customer, but nothing prevented someone from printing multiple copies and using them repeatedly in separate transactions. Their customer care team over the phone told customers one thing while corporate instructed store employees to do something else, leaving the store employees to deal with angry customers who had been misled. I have lost all respect for Build-A-Bear Workshop. Story 51. I just started a new job that I love. The only problem is that they are converting the entire office to open plan. Our area is up next for conversion. Everyone I have talked to opposes it, and colleagues who currently work in open plan spaces report very negative experiences. Those who champion open plan offices most are the ones exempt from working in them. I can already see my productivity and morale declining because I would be forced to hear every noise from roughly 200 people in my section of the building. I think open plan offices are one of the worst ideas. Story 52. He told us we were all replaceable. A staff of 20, poorly paid but very caring healthcare assistants worked in a private nursing home. In the private sector in the United Kingdom, wages are low because they are not mandated by the government, unlike the National Health Service or the County Council. He was a drunken moron, and I only stayed because his wife was the best nursing home owner I had ever worked for. She just had a blind spot regarding her alcoholic husband. Some of the older women, ones with husbands who earned salaries rather than wages, stood up and left. Someone phoned his wife and she came in. We did not see him for 2 weeks, and when we did, she had demoted him to care assistant. I was his line manager, and she made him apologize to all of us. That is why the older ladies came back and no one left. He had killed morale, but his wife, the brains of the operation, brought it back to life. Story 53. Worked at a trading shop where up to 80% of yearly compensation was in the form of an end-of-year bonus. One year they decided that before the bonus was paid out, every employee had to sign a draconian non-compete agreement banning employment for 12 months at any competing firm. Also, you had to sign it blindly. Some folks signed and then were told they did not get a bonus. Edit. For those who care, I signed the non-compete, took my bonus such as it was, and walked out the door with both middle fingers pointing straight at the ceiling. During my 1 year on the sidelines, I built my own kick-ass trading capability that was light years ahead of what I left behind. That was definitely the oomph my career needed. Thank you, miserable assholes. Story 54. I am not sure if this counts. I was interning on the Hill for a congressman who will go unnamed. As an intern, your job is generally awful. Our only high points in the day were that we could choose which meetings to attend. The good ones had lots of food. We had an hour for lunch, and all the interns could go to lunch together. The congressman decided he did not want his office run that way. We were assigned the worst meetings on the Hill. We only got 30 minutes for lunch, and we had to go to lunch one at a time. We ended up fighting over who got to go to lunch between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Every day some unlucky person had to go to lunch at 4 p.m. I will not name the congressman because I still work in Washington politics. Story 55. I am a security guard at a library. My boss wanted me to move around a lot, which was fine. I would get up every 15 minutes, patrol the entire building, then sit back down for another 15 minutes. The library is not very busy, so this routine worked, and my coworkers know how to reach me. However, a coworker who is known for micromanaging people she does not supervise told my supervisor I was slacking off and not doing my job properly. Instead of talking to me, my boss said I should be constantly walking for 4 to 8 hours straight with no sitting down at all, and that the only other security guard had been fired, so I had to take his shifts too. Other than a legally required 15-minute break, I was expected to walk all day and make my presence known to the dozen or so patrons we have. I am turning in my 2-week notice on Wednesday, and in the meantime I take very long bathroom breaks. Story 56. He would say things like, "I don't care. Get it done," or "just do it the way the client asked," when told why certain things would not work. The client would then come back angry because it did not work. Once one of my bosses, a former best friend, admitted, "I knew it was not going to work, but I did not want to admit I was wrong. Sorry. Geek Squad is a great environment. Then again, your mileage may vary, as the job was great before we got new leaders who did not know how to act or run the department. Story 57. I worked extremely hard at a company, effectively on call 24 hours a day for 3 years, leading development of core products. My manager constantly told me I was wrong, only to return 2 months later and instruct people to do what I had recommended while claiming it was his idea. He blamed me for every product mistake, including those that resulted from his decisions, and prevented me from doing the work I had been hired to do because he refused to hire enough staff to clear a chronic backlog. He once told me he did not care about my career progression or anyone else's on my teams when he canceled our participation in conferences so we could work long hours on a project we had nearly completed. We lost 3 people on a team of 4 that supported the core product. About half the staff has turned over, yet the company insists nothing is wrong and that he is a great leader. I will be a reference for another person who is leaving tomorrow. Story 58. After promising a generous holiday schedule, our bosses forced everyone to work on the 4th of July and on the 5th, which had been scheduled as a day off. That was rough. Story 59. I work part-time at a university library while I attend school. I sit at the checkout desk and information desk. My boss, after one of us did not say goodbye to her one night, decided that we college students do not know how to sit at a desk and answer basic library questions. Now she sits there every other hour and criticizes our every move. When it is the middle of summer and only 7 people are in the library, things like this make me want to quit my job. We cannot even read a book at the desk in the library. It made me realize that she takes this way too seriously, and that has made me care even less. Story 60. A satellite television provider canceled the bonuses for a 2-month competition in the last couple of weeks for a group of their customer service representatives. We worked very hard helping new customers who had problems and significantly improved customer satisfaction scores, yet we never received a bonus from that incentive. Later that year, the company reneged on another promised bonus. The company repeatedly disavowed incentives, and managers knowingly misrepresented or miscalculated bonuses, despite the incentives being printed in literature provided to employees. I was there only a year and a half. Morale was terrible. Story 61. The company owner left on a 2-week vacation to Chile without telling anyone. It was a small marketing firm with about 7 employees. I texted him on Monday morning around 11:30 asking where he was. He often stayed out late drinking and typically did not arrive before 11. He told me he was on vacation and put me in charge for the next 2 weeks, probably because I was the first person to contact him. He missed 2 client meetings and 1 campaign pitch, all of which went okay, and we managed without him. I signed a new account, completed all the paperwork, and was developing new campaign ideas to show him when he returned. He called only twice to check in. He returned 2 weeks later and declared the company bankrupt, saying we were all out of jobs. That instantly killed morale. Story 62. They replaced the Pepsi, Coke, and coffee machines with fucking Sobe Life water machines. There was literally a riot in the break room. You do not deny overnight workers their caffeine. Story 63. I worked as a consultant for a company. After a few weeks, I discovered one engineer ran a 1-person automation department. He was a top-tier coder who could produce solutions in hours that other developers would take weeks to deliver. Nearly every department used his tools and services to automate their processes. Halfway through my project, they fired him and removed his tool. Almost immediately, company metrics fell, in most cases by 30 to 50%. After a few weeks, the company was desperate and asked him to return. He declined. He had interviewed with their largest competitor, which offered him double his original salary. They hired several people to replace him, none as capable. When I left, the department had around 10 people and still had not recovered the earlier metrics. Many departments lost staff as people were stressed trying to do work that had previously been automated. Story 64. They gave us all a nice raise because so many people were leaving to work for a competitor that paid more. Then management changed, and when it came time for our scheduled smaller annual cost of living adjustment, They said the previous raise was only to get us through until the cost of living adjustment and that they were taking it away and requiring us to repay part of it. At least we could repay it over several paychecks. So many people gave their 2 weeks notice that day and the next, but many changed their minds within a week. Story 65. The company I worked for has had several problems. They canceled meetings where everyone could get on the same page because the boss could not handle public constructive criticism. They changed how pay and tip sharing for supervisors worked without notice and attempted short-sighted pay structure changes for employees. When the employees discovered this, it was at first denied. Then we were told it was none of our concern even though it affected all of our pay. Story 66. Mandatory overtime 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. He claimed we were deliberately failing to meet his physically impossible goals to force us into overtime, even though no one wanted it. This went on for months. He would also fire dozens of people at once. The paychecks were good, but I had to get out. For the only time in my life, I quit without another job lined up. When I worked there, they preferred employees with some technical background. Last I heard, they had burned through so many people they were hiring anyone. For some reason, he wanted to take our chairs away. He equated sitting with not working hard. We worked on an assembly line, and although I often had to walk around, there were long stretches when sitting made sense. He extended this philosophy to the engineers who had desk jobs, laughing out loud. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.